Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Kunja Vihari Iskon Govind ki jai, Shakapad ki jai, Shishikoti Nidana Shishi ki jai, Govind ki jai. Reading from Nectar of Devotion, chapter entitled Devotional Qualification. There are concrete examples of how the way discharged from his services may please the Krishna. One could achieve the desired goal of life simply by heeding from the Bhagavatam. Sri Swami achieved the desired goal of life simply by reciting from the Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj became successful in his devotional service by always remembering the Veda. Lakshmi God is fortunate successful by engaging himself in massaging the lotus feet of the Lord. When Dasi became successful by worshipping in the temple, and Priya became successful by offering prayers, Hanuman became successful by rendering personal service to Lord Ramakrishna. Arjuna became successful by examples of devotees who discharged all the different items together. In the 9th canto, 4th chapter, verse 18, 19, and 20 of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a statement about Maharaj Ambarish who followed every one of the devotional processes. In these verses, Sri Swami says, King Ambarish first of all concentrated his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and then engaged his speech in describing the pastimes and activities of the Lord. He engaged his hands in washing the temple of the Lord. He engaged his ears in hearing of the transcendental glories of the Lord. He engaged his eyes in seeing the beautiful deity in the temple. He engaged his body in associating with pure devotees of the Lord. When you associate with someone, you have to sit down together, eat together, etc. And in this way, the touch of your body with his body is inevitable. Ambarish Maharaj made his association only with pure devotees, and he did not allow his body to be touched by anyone else. He engaged his nostrils in smelling the flowers and tulsi offered to Krishna, and he engaged his tongue in tasting Krishna prasad, prepared specifically for offering to Lord, the remnants of which are taken by the devotee. Maharaja Purish was able to offer very nice prasad to Krishna because he was a king and had no scarcity of finances. He used to offer Krishna the most royal dishes and would then taste them as Krishna prasad. There was no scarcity in his royal style because he had a very big temple wherein the deity of the Lord was decorated with costly paraphernalia and offered high grade food, so everything was available. And his engagements were always completely in Krishna's consciousness. The idea is that we should follow in the footsteps of great devotees. If we are unable to execute all the different items of devotional service, we must try to execute at least one of them if we can attain a previous attainment. If we are engaged in the execution of all the items of devotional service, our working without unbelief, then the perfection of devotional service is guaranteed by each benefit. For the first completion devotion to the Lord, liberation of all the devotion as his maid servant. Srila Goswami says that the regulated principles of devotional service are sometimes described by authorities as the path of serving the Lord and offerings. Sri Rupa Goswami Prabhupada Gita Bhakti Samhita. The end of the chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Shukdev Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 12, Text 10. Kalpiyatvatmana yavad. Kalpiyatmatmana yavad. Abhasam idam ishvaraha. Abhasam idam ishvaraha. Dvaitam tavanna virame. Abhasam idam ishvaraha. Dvaitam tavanna virame. Tato hi asya viparayah. Kalpayatvatmana yavad. Abhasamidam ishvaraha. Dvaitam tavanna viramet. Tato hi asya viparayah. Kalpayatvatmana yavad. Abhasamidam ishvaraha. Dvaitam tavanna viramet. duality. Dava, for that long. Na, does not. Viramed, see. Tata, by such duality. He, indeed. Asya, of the person. Viparyayaha, counteraction. Translation. As long as a living entity is not completely self-realized, as long as he is not independent of the misconception of identifying with his body, which is nothing but a reflection of the original body and senses, he cannot be relieved of the conception of duality, which is epitomized by the duality between man and woman. Thus, there is every chance that he will fall down because his intelligence is bewildered. Please repeat. As long as a living entity is not completely self-realized, as long as he's not independent of the misconception of identifying with his body, which is nothing but a reflection of the original body and senses, he cannot be relieved of the conception of duality, which is epitomized by the duality between man and woman. Thus, there is every chance that he will fall down because his intelligence is bewildered. Prophet Vishal Prabhupada teacher. Here is another important warning that a man must save himself from attraction to women. Until one is self-realized, truly independent of the illusory conception of the material bodies, the duality of man and woman must undoubtedly continue. But when one is actually self-realized, this distinction ceases. Vidyai Vinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavi Hastini Shnitai Vasapakika Kandika Samadarshana. The humble sage for virtue of true knowledge sees to be provision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater outcast. Bhagavad Gita 5:18. On the spiritual platform, the learned person not only gives up the duality of man and woman, but also gives up the duality of man and animal. This is the test of self-realization. One must realize perfectly that the living being is spirit soul, that is tasting various types of material bodies. One may theoretically understand this, but when one has practical realization, then he actually becomes a pundit, one who knows. Until that time, the duality continues, and the conception of man and woman also continues. In this stage, one should be extremely careful about mixing with women. No one should think himself perfect and forget the Shastric instruction that one should be very careful about associating even with his daughter, mother, or sister, not to speak of other women. Srila Madhvacharya cites the following shlokas in this. Bahutve naiva vastunam yathartha jnanam uchite advaita jnanam iti etat dvaitam jnanam tat anyatha yatha jnanam tatha vastu tatha mati naiva jnanarthayo vedas tata ekatva vedanam. Unity in variety is real knowledge, and therefore giving up variety artificially does not reflect perfect knowledge of monism. According to the Chinta Bheda philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there are varieties, but all of them constitute one unit. Such knowledge is knowledge of perfect oneness. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmritanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadammayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the verse again, as long as the living entity is not completely self-realized, as long as he's not independent of the misconceptions of identifying with his body, which is nothing but a reflection of the original body and senses, he cannot be relieved of the conception of duality, which is epitomized by the duality between man and woman. Thus, there is every chance that he will fall down because his intelligence. Brahmachari life, what brahmachari should do, what he shouldn't do, and especially in his connection with women. This section, these last few verses are in connection with his association with women. So we can see that it's a very important part of Vedic culture, because Narada Muni is giving the chapters entitled "The Perfect Society for Spiritual Classes." So this is the perfect society Narada Muni is describing, in which everyone behaves in a certain way towards each other. A brahmachari behaves in a certain way, a grihasta in a certain way, vanaprastha and sannyasi, they all have their different roles to play in the varnashram system, and they have a particular code of conduct or behavior, which is very important to follow. So it's interesting that I was listening to a lecture, and this Prabhu was saying that there are 4 things in Krishna conscious life. There's knowledge, there's discipline, there's culture, and there's a facility for purification. And he described that knowledge is Shastra, discipline is Astra, culture is Vastra, and facility for purification is Mantra. So sometimes people think, well, I'll just accept the philosophy, but I'll just not be interested in the culture, I'll just interested in the philosophy. And some people think, well, I'm not really interested in the philosophy, but I like the culture. I like the, culture. But we have to have both. We can't have one or the other. It won't work. So it's like without a container, you can't really have a content. The container is there so that the content can actually be, properly contained. So Krishna conscious philosophy is like the content, but we need a container, and that is the culture. Without the culture, it's not going to be able to practice the Krishna conscious philosophy properly. So that's why Prabhupada created an institution. It's like a facility, it's like a container where we can actually, the culture is exhibited. It creates the facility for culture. And so it's much easier to practice the philosophy of Krishna consciousness then. So Narada Muni, he's presenting the realistic culture of human civilization. It's not some sort of made up. He's not just making it up. This is actually Krishna's words. This is actually Krishna's perfect ideal society that Krishna wants us to follow, this varnashram system. So Narada Muni is not like a male chauvinist. He's not like against women, is like a woman hater or anything. But he's saying that as long as we're in the bodily conception of life, and as long as we're, seeing the difference between man and woman, we're not actually on the level where we're seeing the spirit soul, then we should follow this. We should apply this restrictions between man and women. And we have to distinguish between the 2 different man and women. We have to distinguish. There has to be distinction, and it has to remain there. And even those who are off the bodily platform, who are pure devotees, who are Mahabhagavats, they still follow this to set an example for others. Like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's an ideal sannyasi. He's a supreme personality of Godhead. He's not under the rules and regulations of this world, but still to teach others, he followed this perfectly as an ideal sannyasi. He had practically any connection with women. And even his disciples, the Goswamis, they were very strict in this as well. So if we don't think that we're on this, if we think we're above this, we're so advanced that we don't really have to follow these rules and regulations, we're like beyond this, then this actually leads to Sahajism. And we start thinking that, we can just do whatever we want. We don't have to follow these rules and strict rules and regulations. It's all about love, and it's all about seeing everybody equally. And we can behave equally with man and women, but this is actually not what Shastra says. So, the feeling that what's the big deal? It's not a big problem. Then this isn't actually proper culture. So, because along with the knowledge, there has to be some discipline. because if there's no discipline, then there's no fear of punishment. We don't really think there's any fear of embarrassment or fear of consequences. We don't think that there's any need to be afraid of anything, you see. So if we don't have the discipline, then we'll just think, well, we can do what we want. We have the knowledge. We can talk all the philosophy. We have all the we all have all the shlokas, but we don't have to follow the discipline. Then that's not actually good. That's actually violating the Shastric codes. And Prabhupada says in the purport of the first canto I was reading yesterday, he said, in the Kali Yuga, the population is just a royal edition of the animals. They have nothing to do with spiritual knowledge or godly religious life. So we see the whole world, the situation, the whole propaganda in the world is designed in such a way that to be more and more unregulated and, deny the future consequences, deny the existence of God, so then there's no consequences for what we do. But this is a very dangerous mentality, and this is what the world's propaganda is trying to propagate is, you don't have to worry about the consequences, just do whatever you like. This is like a royal edition of the animal society. So without discipline, no one will follow the philosophy, because if there is a facility, for example, to cheat or steal, then people will cheat and steal. There are very few people who will be able to restrain themselves, or for the temptation of sense gratification, unless there's some discipline, unless there's some consequences. So even if a sannyasi in the royal or renounced order, if he tries to act smart and thinks, well, I'm so advanced, I don't have to follow these rules and regulations, then he will become agitated and he will fall down. And we have seen that through history, that so many have fallen because of this, thinking that they're so advanced that they don't have to be cautious. And that's when Maya comes, because when we're off guard and we actually fall into Maya. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually, this very important point, he says, preaching without proper conduct is a mundane activity. It's karma kanda. Such an important point, that if we're preaching and we're not properly behaving, then it's just karma kanda. It's not actually devotional service. So proper behavior means culture. And how do we behave in every ashram? We have to understand, how do we behave? How do we behave in front of a sannyasi? How do we behave in front of a guru? How do we behave in front of a brahmana? How do we behave in front of a politician? How do we behave in front of a woman? We have to understand all these things. And so there seems to be some sort of controversy in the movement right now. Well, women should be called Prabhu, not Mataji, because Prabhupada called them Prabhu. It's a bit ridiculous. I looked up Vani quotes and I found so many quotes where Prabhupada says that he's quoting Chanakya Pandit, and he says, Chanakya Pandit has given the definition of a learned scholar. Who is a learned scholar? Who is a Pandit? He has given the definition. What is this? Matravat paradarishu. To see every woman except his wife as mother, this is education. This is education, perfection of education. When you can see all women except your wife as mother, this is education. There the culture begins. So, and there's so many quotes where Prabhupada is saying this, so many lectures, so many places in the Bhagavatam, so many places in all the books. Prabhupada is stressing this point, and he even says that everyone will call a woman as mother, never mind she is a younger or older, it doesn't matter, woman has to be addressed as this is Shastra. So it's like, it's so clear, there's no like ifs and buts or any sort of, in so many places Prabhupada says that. So everything gets invented or this new thing comes up, but Prabhupada didn't say these things, and he quotes so many times that everyone, or brahmachari should see every woman as mother, and a grihasta should see every woman as mother except his wife. That's the culture. And so And similarly, a woman, she should see every man as a son, except her husband. That's culture from a woman's side. So that's not been taught. That's not been properly exemplified in society. It's not been propagated. But this is actually real culture. If you want a proper society, if you want a perfect society, then this has to be the main. And it's interesting what Chanakya Pandit says. He doesn't say a perfect scholar is one who knows lots of shlokas and lots of philosophy. He says a learned person, a learned scholar is the definition that he sees every woman as except his wife as mother. That's the definition of a scholar. It's nothing to do with how much he learns philosophy-wise or learned Sanskrit slokas, you know. So if we can understand from this that why there's problems in society is because the culture isn't there. And that's why even if we present the philosophy, if the culture is not followed, then it's not going to work. There's going to be so many problems and so many fall downs because this culture isn't properly followed. And also this culture was actually, from the very beginning, the women and men were trained like this from the beginning. And that's why things actually worked. There was a perfect society because all these cultural things were followed. So we have to have all these things in place. It's not just that we've just got the knowledge and we just, if we have proper knowledge, then we will actually follow the culture. We'll follow it properly. And the discipline has to be there, the purification, the facility for purification has to be the mantra. We have to chant, we have to follow Shastra, we have to be disciplined, and we have to follow the culture. And in this way, there will be a perfect society if we do follow this. And if we think we're beyond it, then that's when the problem starts. And then we won't be able to have a proper Vedic society. And we won't be able to follow the proper varnashram system. There has to be respect, there has to be proper respect to different personalities. And this way we will be safeguarded and we will be able to follow in this proper way. So it's a short class, but any questions or comments?
Yeah, I was just wondering, sometimes we may see that a devotee may avoid wearing saffron so that he can mingle freely with women, but at the same time he doesn't want the entanglement of marriage. Person is that?
Maybe they're not sure which ashram they belong in. Well, like that is, there has to be some honesty in their part that they may not, they may be attracted to the idea of associating with women, but they're not sure who it's going to be yet. But in the same sense, they have to, even in a grihastha life, even if they become a grihastha, they still have to follow the rules of a brahmachari, that is, see every woman as mother. It's not like it's a license now that they can talk with all the women. It's not like that. Brahmachari and grihastha are very similar. They still have to follow the same principles. So a brahmachari sees all women as mother, and a grihastha sees all women as mother except his wife. There's only one difference, he's got a wife, but he still sees all women as mother.
Is it a further degradation if we live in a society where they don't have the culture to recognize that there should be separation between male and female? Then is it a further degradation that they then start to not properly identify what is a female?
Can you clarify that? I didn't understand.
Yeah, they are saying now that gender is not a question of biological, but it's a question of a person's attitude or sentiment?
Well, we have to see the externals as well, like the form of a woman, whether they think they're a woman or not. If they have a form of a woman, then, it's like, then they're considered a woman. They may have a different mentality, but somebody seeing them doesn't see like that. It's like a tiger thinking, well, I'm not really a tiger. I'm like a budgie. I can act like a budgie, but he's got the body of a tiger. So we have to see that, and we have to treat it like it's a tiger, not as a budgie. Just because it thinks that, oh, I'm not a tiger, I'm actually a budgie. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It seems, because it's Narada Muni is saying that the living entity, until he's self-realized, then he's going to identify with the body. And then even more illusioned than that is that he doesn't even identify with the body. He just identifies with his mind. It's like, it's bad enough identifying with the body that you've got, never mind not even identifying with that as yourself.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like, these are very advanced souls. And there's thousands and thousands of them. There's not one woman there. That's the culture, It's not like they're against women, but this is the culture.
Yeah, I was thinking when you said that, because Narada Muni, he was the one that protected Hiranyakashipu's wife, and the demigods were prepared to kill the child, which can you imagine what Hiranyakashipu would have been like when he got back if they'd have done that? They'd have been in big trouble. But Narada Muni wanted to protect, and so he took on all the demigods, and he said, and so because of that, then they.
See, with great personalities like Narada Muni, and other great personalities like Krishna, and we can't imitate them. We have to follow their instructions. So there's one thing imitating and one thing following instructions. So like Krishna can associate with so many ladies, gopis, but we can't imitate that. We have to follow Krishna's instructions, and this is Krishna's instructions, this Varnashram system. So we have to follow his instructions in the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, what he wants us to follow. He says we should become free from sex life. We should follow this perfect society, ideal society. We can't imitate Krishna's pastimes. And that's the problem. When we jump too fast, too quickly, we think, oh, Krishna does this, so why not imitate Krishna? Why do we have to
Some women that feel that's making them, by calling them mother, Mataji, that is a derogatory term, that it's disrespecting them.
Well, in the modern world, that's considered, because women are not treated like mothers. They're treated like some exploit, something to exploit. So they don't really have this proper culture, and that's why they get offended. But a mother, being called a mother, is a very respectful reverence. There's a lot of reverence in that. It's regarded as very, very sacred, So because there's no culture, they don't understand. They think it's like, putting women down, things like this. But that's actually not correct. A mother is considered very, very exalted. So there's 7 mothers. What are the 7 mothers? The wife of a king, the wife of a brahmana, the cow, the earth, the wife of one spiritual master. So many. They're considered mothers. They're exalted. So because in the modern age, women are not. Being a mother is considered like insignificant. It's not considered very highly educated. Like women are more into career-orientated lives, and they don't really want to be housewives and mothers so much. They think that's like a lower, inferior form of life. But this is still not actually culture, because a mother is considered very, very high in Vedic culture.
And also, there was a documentary about how much pressure women are being put under because there's all these models, and they're feeling that unless they look like that, then that makes them second grade. But then the models were saying that even they don't look like the models because the photographs are so photoshopped that it doesn't even look like the person that they're photographing. So everything's just become so unreal. And
Well, it's all based on the bodily concept. They're not going any higher. Like Prabhupada says, it's like a royal edition of the animals. They're just all bodily concept of life, and that's what it's all rotating around. This propaganda is just to get everybody embroiled more and more in the bodily concept of life.
it seems to be going beyond that now. So they're not even identifying the body itself isn't what it seems to be, and then they're not even identifying with the bodies themselves. They're identifying with their kind of preference as to what they want to be. They're trying to assert that that's the reality. You know, if I think of myself as being like this, then that should be accepted. You know.
But anyone can say anything, whatever the mind comes up with, we can identify with that. You know, that's not really, we can't really go by that. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
And there's so many situations now where the body, they're trying to change the body to make it look more beautiful, making the lips bigger and things like that. And rather than just accepting the body they've got, they're trying to enhance it.
And what's the purpose of it? To attract the opposite sex, isn't it? That's the whole point of it. The whole propaganda is to create this attraction bigger and bigger, you know.
Sure.
Whereas in the Vedic civilization, it was in Vedic society, spiritual life. But when there's no spiritual life, then anything goes. When there's no goal, when the spiritual life is not the goal, when sense gratification is the goal, then that's why everything is centered around that, centered around how to change the body so it attracts the opposite sex or the same sex, whatever. You know? So it's not like there's not a proper goal. It's just sense gratification is the goal.
So according to the what Narada Muni is saying here, it would seem that an actual brahmachari is one who sees all women as mother.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how Prabhupada says that that's how brahmacharis were trained up. And that's actually how we should be training ourselves up to, you know, to advance in spiritual life. You wanted to say something? I think, Prabhu. Yes.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class. Is etiquette something that comes out of culture?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Etiquette is part of culture. That's
Right.
that's what it is. Yeah.
Right, so then then culture is based on philosophy. Is that correct? Or?
Well, the culture is like I was saying. It's like the container. The philosophy is there, but without the culture, that philosophy isn't going to be practiced properly. Because if you know, it's like the philosophy is that we're not this body, we're the spirit soul. But in that way, people will think, well, we can associate with anybody. Everyone's a spirit soul. There's no need to have restrictions. You know, we're all the same. We're all one. You know, but the culture is there because we are on the bodily concept of life. So we need restrictions so that we can become advanced in spiritual life. We can't, unless we have these restrictions, there's going to be consequences, there's going to be problems. So like we've got the Varna ashram system, we have to fit in one of the ashrams. We can't just think, well, I'm not really sure where, you know, there has to be something. Either you're a brahmachari or a grihastha. You can't be like in between. You know, there's not like a bachelor ashram. There's no such thing. You have to follow these 4 ashrams Krishna's created. We're creating all these little ones in between, thinking, oh, maybe I'm like between a grihasta and this or that, you know. No, Krishna's created it. Either you're a brahmachari or grihasta. You have to have one or the other, you know. Can't make up your own ashram. I mean, maybe you're not sure yet which ashram you're in. That's understandable, but there needs to be, you have to fit in one of the ashrams. Just Krishna consciousness, because it's going to be confusing. You don't know how to relate to others, you know. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Because in the beginning, in Vedic society, the boys were brought up as brahmacharis in the Guru's ashram. This is the whole system. This is what Narada Muni is explaining. So in the beginning, they were taught brahmachari life. And at a certain point, then they could get married. It's not like they didn't have any training. They all were trained up from the beginning in brahmachari life. Doesn't matter what ashram you're going to be in next. They still, brahmachari training was for everybody, you know. And that's how they could make good grihastas, because they had proper brahmachari training. So this is the problem is now the society is not training boys to become brahmacharis. They're training them to become something else.
The educational, or rather the lack of educational system, is that they're not being shown what roles, and they're not being identified as well, like you're a Vaishya, you're a Kshatriya, and then they can be trained accordingly.
Because everything's so mixed up now in Kali Yuga, there's no clear distinction between, because everyone's like born like a Shudra, so it's only by going through the, you know, process we can think, okay, well, I've got more Brahminical qualities, or I've got more Kshatriya qualities, or I've got more Vaishya qualities, because it's all mixed up. It's an emergency situation, you know, it's like everyone's like in a Shudra, born as Shudras. Because there's no like proper training. So that's why there's so many problems in the world, because no one can understand how they should behave, you know. This behavior is so important, the proper conduct, you know. And we see that in the stories of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, when they went against the culture, that's when there was problems. Like Ravana is a demoniac, kidnapped somebody else's wife. That's demoniac. That's not Vedic culture, you know. And then Duryodhana is trying to disrobe Draupadi, you know, and this is his own like sister-in-law basically, and so that's considered demonic. So that's the result was destruction. Basically, the whole empire of Ravana was destroyed. Whole Kurus were destroyed because they didn't follow proper culture. They insulted the women, you know. So that's why, because they don't follow proper Vedic culture, they're not following proper behavior towards women, and they were destroyed by that. So it's so important. And also women have to play their role properly too. It's not like just the men have to play their part.
Of women advertising things with hardly any clothes on. And I think Srila Prabhupada said, if there is meat eating, it should be done privately, not out in public. And you had like a certain manifesto of how you could start to transition into a kind of Vedic culture. You know?
Have you ever seen any advertisements about mothers, like proper motherly figures? Never see it. Because it's not the thing. It's not the...
Well, there was one actually. It was the meat industry, and it was called The Recipe for Love. And had this mother, and she had like her hands on the shoulders of her son, and he was just about to tuck into a plate of meat, you know. It's called The Recipe of Love. Trying to get away from the violent aspect.
where the cow is also the mother, and she's basically eating the mother. This is this demonic society.
It's interesting that when the earth went to complain to Lord Brahma, the earth went in the form of a cow, of a mother, to complain about the atrocities of the demoniac kings, you know. So, it seems everything breaks down when the leaders become demoniac, then everything is finished, you know.
Yeah, like they're not treating the earth as a mother. They're exploiting the resources of the earth, and they're doing so many they're creating so many problems for the planet Earth. You know, they're not seeing it as a mother. They're not seeing how to protect it. Personalistic. They don't see anything as a mother. The rivers are also goddesses. You know, they're polluting all the rivers because it's impersonal. They don't have a personal understanding that every river, the earth is a goddess. The rivers are goddesses. They don't have any respect.
Yeah. Which would be real education.
Yeah.
Teaching that respect, you know.
Yeah. So Vedic society is a culture of Vedic civilization is a culture of respect. You know, respect everything and everyone according to their position, according to their what they are. You know, everyone's given proper respect.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. So I suppose in temple it's association, like, or just, keeping that culture is easier. But but then if you go on streets preach, we are approaching the Mataji's, right? So how can we still keep composed and not get distracted on the street?
There has to be some sort of a balance. You know, when we go out, then we're trying to help these souls that are association without being affected by them, and it's very, very difficult. Sometimes it's not easy, you know, and so we have to be careful. We have to be cautious, you know. Like Ajamil, you know, he's brought up in a very cultured society, and he had a wife and everything, and he goes and sees a prostitute embracing a Shudra, and his mind becomes agitated, and from then his downfall starts, just by seeing that. So it's very difficult, you know. We have to be very careful we don't get agitated, you know, and we have to safeguard ourselves from Maya's influence. So, yes, it's very important.
To men who aren't attached to them. Women are attracted to men who are not attached to women, because when men are attached to women, then they become very weak. So the woman doesn't feel so secure, you know. So when you're a brahmachari or a sannyasi, then you have to be careful because of that effulgence and that aloofness, that detachment. That's a very attractive quality for the opposite sex.
Yes. And also I've heard that sometimes the demigods send down heavenly ladies to make sages and sannyasis fall down. So they purposely do that. So we see that in history. Indra sends, you know, apsaras down to break somebody's vows or somebody's sannyas, or, you know, it's very, you know, it can happen.
So then they don't take Indra's position, or is it like something like that? Or?
Yeah, or just for other reasons, I don't know, but it does happen. It says in the Bhagavatam that it happens, you know. So we're in a world of Maya, so we have to be careful. It's not that we're beyond it and we're so advanced that we can just, you know, as soon as there's this thought that, oh, we don't really have to follow so strictly and we're beyond Maya, that's when the danger is, and that's when Maya attacks. When we're the most vulnerable, when we're off guard and we think we don't have to pay any caution to it, That's when we get, Maya's slaps us down. And we've seen it many times. So we have to learn from previous examples, and even with Bharat Maharaj, it wasn't even a woman that it was his fault. Everything, and it's not like he needed a woman to make him fall down. It was a deer. That's the show was how we have to be so careful. Maya's there at every step, and she's ready to take advantage of our small little kind of attachments or any kind of any if we're not cautious, then we can be easily get smashed. So it's not to scare everybody, but it's a warning. You have to be careful.
Hare Krishna. It is often seen actually practically itself, and quite recently I would say, that the Hare Krishnas, they're projected or believed to be as something as sexist religion. I don't understand what it means, but what I gathered is that women are a bit looked down upon and women are treated low and like this. And then within the movement, we see that sometimes female body devotees, they don't like being called as Matajis, or they say women preachers are more needed, we want to be preachers, and then some different groups like this and all. So how can we actually practice, preach, and at the same time create, remove these myths that it's not a sexist religion? Or
It's going to be difficult because of all this women's lib and freedom to do and be independent and all these things. So we're not living in a Vedic culture, and because everyone's bringing their misconceptions media, but ultimately, we have to become humbler than a straw on the street. Ultimately, we have to become Trinada Pisanichina. How are we going to do that if we want to all this, want to be superior to everybody or equal to everybody? The whole point is we have to come to the point where we accept that, we are insignificant, really. This is humility, we don't really consider ourselves anything great. So it goes against the whole point, the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness, trying to be something great. So the problem is, we see in society that when women want to be equal to men and they want their independence, that's a result of it. So this is because they want their freedom to do what men do. But then when they do that, then they get exploited. So what's the point of that? The whole Vedic system was to protect women. The whole point of all this is to protect women so they don't get exploited. But because women think that they want to be equal to men and they want to, have equal rights and they want independence, then they're just going to get exploited by men. So what's the point? It's not going to bring any good solution to the problem. So instead of accepting that, women have their place in society and it's good that they are protected and they follow religious principles nicely and they look after their children and they become good wives and chaste to their husbands, this is not considered so great anymore. This is considered like, oh, we want to have equal rights with the men. We're, want to be called Prabhus instead of Matajis and all this. It just creates problems in the society, even within ISKCON. So it's not what Prabhupada wanted. We see all these quotes, you see, and women are trying to say, no, no, we want to be called Prabhu. Okay, then. But Prabhupada's not saying that. He's quoting Chanaka Pandit, he's quoting so many Shastras as well. Look at this, this is all based on that, The problem is they're saying, well, Prabhupada called them Prabhus. Some of his Prabhupada disciples say, oh, well, Prabhupada called us Prabhu. Why are we called Matajis? But Prabhupada can do that. He's a great personality. We shouldn't imitate him, but we follow his instructions. His instructions are in the books, in his lectures. And he's saying very clearly that everyone should be called a mother, never mind if she's young or old, doesn't matter. Women has to be addressed as mother. So we follow his instructions. That's what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to imitate what Prabhupada did. We can't imitate such great personalities. We can't imitate, all these other great souls. They may have done things like maybe Prabhupada called some of his female disciples Prabhu. There's no problem. He can do that. But his instructions is something else. His instructions is women should be called Mataji or mother, so we follow that. That's what following is. We're not imitating Prabhupada, we're following his instructions. And they're not actually understanding that there's so many places, if you look in Vani quotes, there's so many places where Prabhupada says that. He's even saying they shouldn't even be called Benji, they should be called Mataji. Right? In Indian culture now, it's all like Benji, sister, That's even not correct. Prabhupada doesn't like that. He says that's rascaldom. He says they should be called Mataji. So it's very clear, And but it depends if they want to, follow what they want to follow. They don't want to follow, what Prabhupada said. They just want to follow well, I was treated like this by Prabhupada. Why can't I be treated like that by everybody else? Prabhupada can call you Prabhu, but his instruction is that everyone should call woman Mataji and mother, and that's what we follow. We don't imitate what Prabhupada did. We can't imitate. Can we do all the things that Prabhupada did? Is that okay? Thank you. Sorry if I've said anything out of place, and forgive me if I've been a bit over excited about it, but I just feel like it's important that we follow the instructions rather than try to imitate these personalities. So, Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki